All right, it is time for this week's Sunday sit-down chat where I talk about a topic or today some multiple topics in detail for a longer casual sit-down chat. Um, I just finished attending Geekway to the West here in St. Louis, which is a 4-day convention where where a bunch of people, about 3,000 people, essentially just play games for 4 days straight. And I've been out of the house a lot. It's been an exhausting couple of days, and I'll tell you why in a second. But it has been absolutely amazing. Just the people at Geekway are incredible, and the games that I got to play were incredible. It's an awesome convention. And I figured today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about very briefly all 18 new to me games that I played at Geekway. But very briefly, I'll just mention them. I'll pretty much just say something about them and then I'll move on because I'm going to be talking about my favorite game mechanisms in these games in the coming days. Both of the cats have joined us back there. That's Walter on the floor and Biddy on the table. So this isn't in like ranking order. I actually got pretty lucky because there really wasn't there wasn't a game that I didn't enjoy in this mix. I think it's actually 17 games, maybe not 18. I really enjoyed all of them. I didn't love all of them, but there were no games that I got stuck in or that I was disappointed that I was playing. I genuinely enjoyed all of these games. Looks like we're about to get a little cat battle back there. Hopefully they're not too mean to each other. So anyway, and I want to say before I start, when I go to Geekway, I put out there that I want to play certain games, games that are new to me that I want to learn, and I just want to thank everyone at Geekway who either played a game with me or taught me a game. It takes a lot of my energy and brain power, just to interact with a bunch of people in a space like this. I'm an introvert, but also just to learn a bunch of games. And so it's really helpful that I didn't have to learn these from the rulebook, that I had a helpful teacher there to teach me these games. That was incredible. So thank you so much for doing that. The first game I played, I want to actually try to guess which exact order. This is the rough order of the games I played. Raiders of the North Sea was one of the first games I played. Beautiful game, really clever design with worker placement where you only have one worker at a time and it's not your own worker, and you just take that worker that you have, you place it on the board on an empty space to gain an action, and then you pick up a different worker from another action and take that action. So every turn is a combination of two actions. Which is just a really clever system for worker placement. I've seen this before in Coldwater Crown. I believe those two games were designed at roughly the same time, but I think that's a really clever mechanism for a worker placement game, and it solves some production issues and some decisions in a worker placement game, because oftentimes players instinctively say, oh, okay, I got to get more workers as soon as possible. In this game, you don't even have that choice, but you still feel like there's a ton of things to choose from on the board because of all the workers out there. It also did something clever with the different colors of workers, because only certain action spaces can use certain color workers, and also certain action spaces are better or worse if you use different color workers. So there's this tension of trying to use the right worker and trying to grab the right worker so that you can use it on your next turn. Really cool. My favorite mechanism, which I'll talk about later, was actually an expansion thing. Actually, no, I did a video about this the other day. I did one video over the weekend on Friday. So if you want to check out my favorite mechanism in Raiders, you can see that video. I also played Santa Maria on the first day. This is a dice drafting game with some other mechanisms mixed in, and it has some really clever mechanisms. It's very satisfying in Santa Maria to choose these dice and choose them at the right time. Like, I love order of operations in games when you at the right time you do something, or you wait until the right moment to do something. And Santa Maria has that very satisfying element of like building your board, your engine with these polyomino blocks. I think that's a word for blocks with more than one square in them. Overall, I enjoyed Santa Maria. I played Suspend early in the convention. This is a dexterity game. And this is one of the surprises for me, actually. I'd seen this around, and it kind of looks silly, as many dexterity games do. It's these metal wires, these thick wires that are, they're sturdy. They can't be bent, and they have little half loops in them, semicircular loops. And you take those loops, and you have this thing that like suspends, hence the name Suspend, that suspends in the air, and you hang these things, these wires, from this contraption. It kind of looks like a mobile, the thing that you'd hang over like a baby's crib. And when you on your turn, you're trying to get rid of all of your wires. And so on your turn, you're rolling a die and picking a wire. The die isn't really necessary, but you're taking one of these wires and you're hanging it very carefully, very carefully, because you don't want it or any of the other wires to fall down. And as a dexterity game, I found it very satisfying. It was a very nice surprise, and I'll talk about this in my video, but I really like how subtle you need to be when you place and let go, because as long as you haven't let go, you can pick your thing back up and place it someplace else, so you can kind of test the weights of different areas. I played Atlantis Rising early in the convention. This is a game that has been published, but a new revamped second edition, new art, new mechanisms version is being published by a somewhat local publisher here. I got to Brent, one of the guys involved with it, was there at the table, and it's a cooperative game. I think this might be the only cooperative game that I played. Yeah, only cooperative game. But it has this really cool simultaneous worker placement mechanism that's really cool. That leads to some really nice moments of collaboration, and it just, like, the game. I think their suggestion is that you, for the first few rounds, you take turns placing workers, but once you get into the flow of it, you do it simultaneously, and it leads to what feels like if you were like actual people jostling for position, but you're doing it cooperatively. So, like, I might put a worker down on a spot, but someone else might say, "Hey, I really kind of needed to go there. Is there someplace else you can go?" And I might say yes or no, and we might talk about it. So it leads to this natural, organic collaboration that I love to see in cooperative games. It was really cool. I guess essentially I'm starting to talk about my favorite mechanisms in this game, in this series, but that's okay. I'll go more into detail in videos. I played Groves. Groves is a bag builder. I've liked most of the bag builders I've played. I haven't played that many, but I love Orleans. So I kind of compare them all to Orleans. So I didn't like Groves quite as much as Orleans, but I really liked it. I mean, it was a beautiful bag builder game. It has this cool mechanism where you can build this portal. And if you build the portal, you face it towards one of your opponents, and it lets you use actions that opponent has, which is very powerful because you're not only using actions that you don't have, but you're also putting your worker on those actions and blocking them from that player. So I think the game struck the right balance with this mechanism of requiring enough resources for you to actually build this portal versus the payoff that you get if you do it. I played Indian Summer, an Uwe Rosenberg game, another polyomino game that I was really looking forward to trying. It's a beautiful game. He has a whole series of games that uses this mechanism. He has A Feast for Odin, he has Indian Summer, he has Cottage Garden, and he has Patchwork. And I really like in Indian Summer that you have these tiles that you're trying to fill up your board with, but they all have a hole in them, and that hole can look through to your player mat. And if it lines up with an icon on your player mat, it means something. It's a good thing. So I really like this idea of polyomino tiles with holes in them. I have no idea how Uwe Rosenberg playtested this game. I'm sure he did, of course, but I guess he probably used a hole punch and a bunch of tiles that he cut out by hand. But the work that must have gone into prototyping this is just incredible. I wonder if he does it himself or if he hires someone or some combination of the two. I would rank them if I have to rank them. I would still rank Patchwork first, then A Feast for Odin, then Baron Park, which isn't Uwe Rosenberg's, but it feels like it's part of this series, and then Indian Summer, and then Cottage Garden. So not at the top of this list, but I still enjoyed it. I played Zendo. Zendo is a game where one player essentially makes up a rule and shows what creates kind of a configuration of these tokens. They're three-dimensional tokens that meet that rule, and they create one other cluster that doesn't meet that rule, and all the other players are trying to guess what that rule is by creating their own combinations of these 3D tokens. It reminded me a lot of A Visitor in Blackwood Grove, which I've talked about on this channel, but with 3D tiles instead of an alien visiting Earth and using like Mysterium-like images to figure out the rule. I really enjoyed that game as Zendo. And Zendo came first, too, well before A Visitor in Blackwood Grove. I played Medieval Academy, a game that's been on my list for a couple of years now. I like tracks in games, and this game is all about tracks. Like you're advancing on tracks. You're at certain points in the game, you're resetting a track. Some tracks don't reset. Some score at different times. Some score on their own. Some score compared to different players. Just a really neat track building game. Really nice, and the drafting element of it is really nice too. It's probably like the fastest drafting game I've ever played because the decision points are really, really easy, but they're still interesting. And so, like, the draft part of it just flies by. It's really, really fast. Let's see. London. London was one of the biggest surprises for me. London wasn't on my radar at all for this convention. I played the second edition of it and really, really enjoyed it. I'll talk about why my favorite game mechanism, but I'll mention that I really like the art in it. Everything about it flowed really well. There was one thing I won't mention this in my video because I'll say the one negative thing, and I need to go on BGG and talk about it and figure it out because it has this weird thing where I think if we played it correctly, and I think we did, the game could way outlast its welcome, and not in a way that players are necessarily incentivized not to do. The timer of the game is the deck of cards, and on your turn, you are drawing a card. So you're always drawing a card, but you can draw that card from the deck or from face-up cards. And that might not sound too bad, but usually one of the main actions you're doing in the game is playing a card, and whenever you play a card, you also put a card from your hand among the face-up cards. And so, theoretically, players could almost always draw from those face-up cards and not draw from the deck. And so it can really, really slow down the game if players aren't drawing from that deck. And if you draw from the deck, you're not getting you're getting a random card, whereas if you draw from a face-up card, you are getting maybe exactly what you want. It's open information. You're getting, exactly what you're getting. And so the game incentivizes players to actually draw from the face-up cards and not from the deck, which is the game's timer. So I need to look into if we played this wrong, A, B, if there's something I'm missing in the strategy, and C, if all that is true, if there's a recommended house rule. Because other than that, I really, really love this game. Big surprise for me for the convention. Another surprise for me was Seikatsu. I don't know what it is, but I've played some really good abstract games lately, and Seikatsu was a really good abstract game. I also played Topiary, so that was Seikatsu and Topiary played almost back to back. Both were really, really nice for a convention where like my brain is overloaded with a variety of games, learning games, and these games are really, really simple. The decisions are interesting, but still simple. Seikatsu is cool because it's really beautiful. There are these tiles. You're trying to balance in-game decisions of creating little clusters of birds and late-game decisions of having rows of the same color flowers. Topiary is really cool because it's all about line of sight. You are placing workers so that they can look at this garden that you are somewhat influencing. You're somewhat building, but it's also somewhat set in place. And you're building it for the most part. And but it's like a shared garden, and you're putting these workers down so that their line of sight is ascending. So they're looking at like small plants and then bigger plants and then bigger plants, and you get the most points if you can really line up this really nice row of topiaries. Really, really cool thematic element to an abstract game. I played Majesty for the Realm, a little card game about I guess essentially building your realm. But no, the realm is already built. You are putting workers in that realm and activating the different buildings in your realm. There's some nice player interaction in the game with the military, and it's also it does a nice balancing between like incentivizing you to get workers that you already have in certain buildings. Like there's a building that says like whenever you play a worker on this building, you get whenever you play a brewer on this building, because you always play a certain worker on each building. Whenever you play a brewer on this building, you get 2 points for every brewer on this building. So like in my game, I had a bunch of brewers, and so I kept trying to get more brewers because I was getting more points from that. But I had to balance that with other things because I wanted to have majority on each of the buildings. I wanted to have a variety of workers. I enjoyed it. It was a nice little fast, light game, but with some interesting decisions. Great art too. I played Tyrants of the Underdark. This is one that I've been wanting to play for a while. It actually wasn't on my list, but I'm glad that I got it to the table because I love Clank, and I've heard that it's a little bit like Clank, but with and essentially this is. I have one of these videos about Red Rising, how I tried to design a game for Red Rising. I could actually see the Red Rising game. I could see this Red Rising working in this mechanical structure of Tyrants of the Underdark. It has a lot of really cool mechanisms in it. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really good game. I'll mention one cool thing about it, which is that you shuffle 2 decks together at the beginning of the game to form the deck of cards that you'll be randomly filling the public supply from. And so just inherently, I really like that variability and that variety that 4 decks come with the game, and you're just shuffling 2 together at the beginning of the game. So I think that's 6 different combinations of decks that you get right out of the box. That's pretty cool, and it leaves it wide open for expansions. But there's a lot of other stuff I liked in this game too. Amun-Re I played. I was actually not. I put this on my list, and then I think I took it off. Maybe I can't remember if I left it on at the end, but I heard great things about it. I think from some of the people who watch this channel. But then I looked it up online and saw the design for the graphic design and the art, and it didn't look so good. So I was a little worried about it. But we got it to the table, and apparently Tasty Minstrel has done a new edition that looks beautiful. It's a beautiful version of the game, and we had a great time playing it. It's a really good Reiner Knizia auction game. I would say I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I love Ra. I think I like Ra better, but it's a really good auction game that does this really cool thing where it resets halfway through the game, kind of like what Brass does. So I found that I kind of actually like that mechanism, even when you're learning a game, because you're kind of learning it through the first few rounds, and then you get this pretty big reset in the game that changes the permanent values of certain things. They stay the same, but certain things just change and go back to the beginning. And so it gives you a chance after that point, after you've actually learned the game halfway through, to continue playing the game and play it well, play it better than you did in the first half. So I thought that was pretty cool. What else do we have? Only a few more games here. I know this is a long video. Dice Forge. Dice Forge was one of the biggest surprises of the convention for me. I posted this on Instagram this morning. I did not have this on my list at all, but it was just a delight to play. It's all engine building. I feel like, I wish I had known that about the game earlier, because I probably would have checked it out earlier, but it's all engine building. You're building the engine of your dice, you're building the engine of your cards, and on your you have a little player map that with different tracks that you're advancing, pretty much just to track resources, but it feels like you're on tracks. I love the dice forging mechanism where these are plastic dice that have little pieces built into them, and you can pop them out and put in better pieces. And the really cool thing, the really clever thing about this game is that you roll your dice on every player's turn. Every turn you're rolling your dice and you're taking those resources and you are putting them on your tracks. So you get to, it's not one of these dice games where you hardly ever get to roll dice. You are constantly rolling dice in this game. Absolutely love that. This morning I played The Golden Ages. This is a civilization game I've been wanting to play for a while now because I'm designing the civilization game. And it was really, really cool. It's a little fiddly, but it's actually also very streamlined. A lot of variety in the game and the cards that come out, the leaders that you have, the way the board is constructed during the game and throughout the game. It was a good reminder to me that like the fiddly things in civilization games often come from the board and the interactions with other players on the board. Even in a simple game like this, those were the things that were difficult to remember. Whereas everything else was very, very streamlined. But yeah, really, I had a really, really good time playing it. I appreciate Ben for teaching it. And then last, I played some other games that weren't new to me. I won't mention them in this video. This is kind of toes the edge, because the last game I played was Role Player, which I have played before and love. But we played it with the expansion for the first time, which people have said is like the second half of the game. And I really, really liked it. It doesn't detract from the original base game at all for me, because I really, really enjoyed that. I would gladly play the base game by itself again. But the expansion added some interesting choices. You're earning experience points by fighting little minions throughout the game. And you're doing that both because the experience points are very helpful, but also because you're gearing up for a big boss battle at the end, which feels epic and awesome, kind of. I mean, you're basically chucking a bunch of dice, which is nice. It was always fun. These dice games are making me want to design another dice game. I've designed Euphoria, but I want to design a bigger dice game, I think. Essentially I played Azul after that, but that was essentially the last game that I played at the convention, and it was a nice way to close out the convention because I've been wanting to play the expansion to Role Player. Lots of games here, tons of games. If you have any games that I mentioned that you love or that you have thoughts on, feel free to mention in the comments. I'll also be talking about pretty much all these games in detail if I have a favorite mechanism in them in the coming weeks. So I look forward to discussing them more in detail with you on those videos. Thanks, and if you haven't attended Geekway, I highly recommend it. Get on their mailing list and come next year and play a game with me. I'd love to do that. I think I played games with 50, 60 different people at the convention. I was just walking around playing games with random people, and it was awesome. So hopefully I'll get to play a game with you next year if you attend. Take care.